Hello everyone. Subscribe to the channel to get more videos. Also, let us know in the comments what city you are watching from. Now let's begin this one. The party was supposed to be a celebration. It was supposed to be about me moving forward, about new beginnings. But sitting at the lavish banquet table, surrounded by colleagues who clinked glasses and exchanged hollow small talk, all I could think about was how wrong everything felt. My name is Liam. I'm 32 years old, an aerospace engineer at a firm in Seattle. The work I do is challenging, complex, and to most people, impressive. But as I sat there that night, sipping champagne, the only thing I could feel was emptiness. The kind of emptiness that came with betrayal, and it was choking me. I kept glancing over at Marissa, who was surrounded by my coworkers, laughing and smiling, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her bright eyes as fake as the happiness she projected. The woman I thought I was going to spend my life with, the one who promised we would build a dream house together and travel the world after we got married, wasn't the same person anymore. Her betrayal had been quick, sharp, and sudden. It wasn't even a matter of us anymore. There was no us. Not after she left me for Darren Rivers, the famous travel vlogger who, with his rugged good looks and charisma, swept her off her feet in a way I couldn't. A couple months ago, we had sat down and mapped out our future together. We talked about where we wanted to live, where we'd go on our honeymoon, what kind of house we'd build. I'd sacrificed for that vision. I'd worked overtime, saved, and planned everything down to the smallest detail. I thought we were in it together, but she hadn't been in it at all. Not really. The ring on my finger suddenly felt like a heavy weight, pulling me deeper into a pit of resentment. It wasn't like anyone knew. Not here, not at the office. To them, I was the successful, heartbroken groom. The one who would have a beautiful future, even if it didn't seem so perfect right now. But what they didn't know, what none of them would ever understand, was that I was no longer playing that role. I didn't need their sympathy. I didn't need to fake the smile. I didn't need to pretend that everything was okay. Not anymore. My thoughts drifted back to the night she left. She had packed a few bags, barely looked me in the eye, and said she was going to be with Darren. That was it. No fight, no explanation. Just a cold, calculated exit. I felt the bubbling laughter inside me before I could stop it. The sound burst out unexpectedly, causing a few heads to turn. For a split second, I thought I had laughed too loud, that it was a mistake. But then, I realized it wasn't a mistake at all. It was the truth. I was free. The freedom felt both terrifying and exhilarating. All this time, I had been holding on to a dream that wasn't mine to keep. I had been pretending, for her, for everyone, that this relationship was what I wanted. But the truth was, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just free. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The conversation around me stuttered to a halt, all eyes on me. Guys, I said, my voice steady but loud enough to command attention, I'm done pretending. And without looking back at Marissa, I reached into my pocket, pulled off the engagement ring, and tossed it into my half-full glass of champagne. The metal clinked as it landed, sinking to the bottom. I'm done, I said again, turning on my heel. No one stopped me as I walked out the door, my mind already racing ahead to what came next. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I had no idea what was coming, but whatever it was mine to control. And for once, that felt enough. I couldn't go home. Not yet. Not when everything there, her things, our things, felt like a reminder of the life I thought I was going to have. Instead, I drove, not knowing exactly where I was going, just knowing I had to get away from it all. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a luxury hotel on the edge of downtown Seattle. The same hotel where Marissa and I had planned to stay for our honeymoon. I swallowed hard at the thought, but I didn't turn away. I walked into the lobby, the plush carpeting soft beneath my shoes, the air cool and scented with floral arrangements. I wasn't here for a vacation. I wasn't even here to think about what had happened. I was here because I needed to take control of something, anything, after losing so much. The clerk behind the desk looked up at me with a professional smile. Good evening, sir. How may I assist you? I cleared my throat. I'd like to book the honeymoon suite, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. She checked the computer, nodding. It's available, but we only have one room left. It's premium. Would you like to proceed? Yes, I said, without hesitation. I'll take it. I gave her my ID and a credit card. A few minutes later, I had a key card in hand, the heavy weight of it symbolizing more than just a room. It was a choice. My choice. I didn't know what I was doing, But I knew I couldn't go back to that apartment tonight. Not with the reminders of her. Not with the ghost of our plans haunting me in every corner. The elevator ride to the top floor felt long and quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I stepped out, walking down the hallway to the suite. As I slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open, I felt a jolt of something: anticipation, relief, maybe even dread. The suite was just as luxurious as I'd imagined. A massive bed with high thread count sheets, a fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows that showed off the glittering city lights. Everything about it screamed luxury, and yet, all I could see was a space that was meant to be shared, a dream I no longer had. I tossed my jacket onto the chair by the window and walked over to the minibar, grabbing a bottle of water. I stared at the view for a while. Seattle spread out before me like a city that could be mine to conquer. But it wasn't just the city I was focused on. It was the idea that had begun to bloom in my mind since I left the party: freedom. I couldn't change the past, couldn't erase the hurt that had come from Marissa's betrayal, but I could move forward. I glanced at the bathroom and thought about the tux I'd worn just a few hours ago. I needed to change. But more than that, I needed to feel something, anything besides the weight of her absence. The shower was everything I needed. The water was hot and sharp, washing away the tension, the remnants of the night that had almost broken me. By the time I stepped out, I had made a decision. I put on the tux again, the one I had bought for the wedding that wasn't going to happen. It felt ridiculous, but it also felt right. It felt like reclaiming something. Once I was dressed, I walked back to the living area, surveying the suite. This was where Marissa and I should have started our future. But I wasn't going to mourn it. Not tonight. Tonight, I was going to take back what was mine. I walked to the phone and dialed. Hello. The voice on the other end was a familiar one: Kyle, an old college buddy. Hey, man, I said, my voice calmer now that I had a plan. What's going on tonight? There was a pause, followed by a chuckle. I was about to head out with some friends to a rooftop bar downtown. You in? I smiled, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. Yeah, I'm in. I'll meet you there. I hung up, grabbed my keys, and walked out of the suite. As I stood in the elevator, waiting to descend, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was free. And maybe, for the first time in years, that was all I really needed. The rooftop lounge was buzzing with energy when I arrived. The lights from the city below twinkled like 1,000 stars, and the soft hum of music mingled with the chatter of people celebrating the end of their workweek. The bar was crowded, but the vibe was relaxed. I spotted Kyle and his group near the bar, laughing and clinking glasses. Liam, Kyle called out when he saw me, waving me over. You made it. We were just about to send out a search party. I chuckled as I approached, shaking his hand. Would have been a shame to miss out on a free drink. Exactly. He grinned and gestured to the group of women around him. This is Sarah, Emma, and Ivy. You remember Kyle, right? I glanced around, nodding at the familiar faces. Then, my eyes fell on Ivy, a veterinary student with a fiery presence. She had striking red hair, tied back loosely, and eyes that were alive with curiosity. She flashed a bright smile at me when I met her gaze, the kind of smile that made you feel like you'd just been invited into an inside joke. Nice to meet you, I said, shaking her hand. Liam. Ivy, she replied, her voice warm but confident. What's the deal with the tux, Liam? You just out of a wedding? The question hit a little too close to home, but I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, actually. Long story short, I'm not getting married anymore. She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I'm sorry to hear that, but I've got to say, it takes guts to show up to a bar in a tux. I needed to feel like I was doing something for myself, I admitted, glancing around the lounge. It's a weird night, but I figured why not just own it? Ivy smirked. Fair enough. I get it. Sometimes you have to shake things up, right? Exactly. As the conversation drifted to other things, I found myself more drawn to Ivy than I expected. She wasn't just an escape from the tension I'd been carrying for months. There was something easy about her, something genuine that made me feel comfortable in a way I hadn't felt all day. The group shifted into a circle, everyone talking over each other, laughter rising and falling. Kyle motioned toward the dance floor, where people were moving to a catchy, upbeat track. I think it's time for us to hit the floor, Liam, he said, half grinning. Come on, let's go. I hesitated for a second. I wasn't much of a dancer, but the last thing I wanted was to stand around awkwardly and wallow in the fact that my life had been turned upside down. So I shrugged and followed them out to the dance floor. Ivy was already making her way toward the music, and without thinking, I followed her. She was already moving, her hips swaying with the beat, not a care in the world. I couldn't help but watch her for a second, mesmerized by how natural and free she seemed. Then she caught my eye, grinning, and winked as she pulled me into the rhythm. The music played on, but I wasn't just following the beat. I was following the freedom I felt, the sense of control I hadn't had in so long. As the night wore on, Ivy and I slipped into an easy rhythm, exchanging smiles and playful moves. With each song, the tension that had built up in me over the past few months started to melt away, replaced by a genuine sense of connection. When a slower song came on, Ivy didn't hesitate. She stepped closer, guiding me into the intimate space between us. "I'll warn you, I'm not a professional," I joked as I held her close. She laughed softly, the sound light and carefree. "Me neither. But that's half the fun, right?" We swayed together, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder, mine at the small of her back. For a few moments, the world outside the dance floor faded. I didn't have to be the heartbroken groom anymore. I didn't have to be anyone's placeholder or stand-in. I was just me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could just be. "So," Ivy said, breaking the silence as we danced, "what happened, Liam?" I'm guessing it wasn't just a case of cold feet. I didn't want to get into it. Not yet. Not with someone I just met. But something in her eyes made me feel like I could open up, like she wouldn't judge me for the mess my life had become. I took a deep breath. She left me for someone else. A travel vlogger. Darren Rivers, if you've heard of him. He's got this huge following online. She was gone. Just like that. "Jesus," Ivy murmured, her voice soft but steady. "That sucks." I nodded. "Yeah. It's like I didn't even matter." One day we were planning our future, and the next, I broke off, shaking my head. But honestly, I think I'm better off now. I just needed to realize it. She tilted her head, considering me. "I get it," she said, her voice full of understanding. "Sometimes you can be so invested in something, you don't even realize it's holding you back until it's too late." "Exactly," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "You get it." Ivy smiled back, her eyes warm. "I do. It's not always easy to see, but you'll get there." The song came to an end, and the upbeat tempo returned. She didn't pull away, though, her fingers still lightly holding on to mine, our connection lingering even as the music urged us to move faster. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could be okay again. Ivy and I didn't stop dancing. We lost ourselves in the music, laughing and moving to the beat like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was exhilarating, being with someone who didn't know my past, who didn't see me as the guy who was still reeling from heartbreak. She just saw me as someone enjoying the night, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of my own disappointment pressing down on me. As the night stretched on, the group grew rowdier, drinks flowing freely, everyone loosening up. Kyle had long since started flirting with a woman from the next table over, and the others were scattered, deep in conversations or dancing on their own. Ivy and I were still together, in our little bubble, finding a rhythm that felt almost right. I looked over at her, still catching my breath from dancing, and smiled. "You're a really good dancer," I said, my voice low but genuine. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not so bad yourself. I thought you were just some stiff engineer type." I laughed. "Guess I've got a little more rhythm than people give me credit for." "You've got more than that," she said, her eyes locking with mine for a second before she turned her attention back to the dance floor. It felt easy with her. Too easy. And for the first time in ages, it wasn't just about keeping up appearances or avoiding the truth. It was about being in the moment, feeling alive without the constant nagging reminders of everything I'd lost. As the song shifted, a slower, more seductive melody came on. The crowd thinned, a few couples melting into each other, and Ivy looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You know, I'm really enjoying this," she said. "But there's no way we're leaving the night without at least a little drama." I raised an eyebrow. "Drama?" "Yeah," she grinned, tugging gently on my arm as she guided me through the shifting crowd. "You need to let go of all that seriousness for a minute. You've been a responsible guy your whole life, haven't you?" I thought about it. For years, I had been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who fixed things, the one who made plans and always followed through. Even when Marissa left me, even when everything fell apart, I stuck to the plan. But tonight felt different. I followed Ivy's lead as we walked toward the bar. She leaned in close as we waited for the bartender to take our order, and her scent, a mixture of something floral and fresh, felt like an electric charge. Her energy, her confidence, was like a magnet, pulling me into a world that didn't ask for explanations or history. We grabbed a couple of drinks, and as we returned to the dance floor, I found myself thinking, really thinking about what I wanted. Not just in the moment, but going forward. There was no rush, no expectations, no more pretending. Ivy seemed to sense my shift, and with a sly smile, she grabbed my hand, leading me to the center of the floor. The music had softened, almost to a whisper, and she leaned in close, her breath warm on my ear. "You need to forget about everything else for tonight," she murmured. "Just be here. Be in this moment." I nodded, my chest tightening with a mixture of excitement and relief. I wasn't thinking about Marissa. I wasn't thinking about the wedding that wasn't. I wasn't thinking about any of it. Just me and Ivy, in this small slice of time that felt like a world apart from everything I'd left behind. And then, out of nowhere, one of her friends, who had been hovering at the edges of the dance floor, came rushing up, looking flustered. Ivy, you have to come," she broke off as she looked at me, clearly taking in the closeness between Ivy and me. Ivy stepped back, a little surprised, but she didn't let go of my hand. She turned to her friend. "What's going on?" "You're not going to believe this," her friend said, practically breathless. "Marissa is over there, across the room. And Darren. They're laughing with." She glanced at me, her voice trailing off. Ivy turned to look at me, her face unreadable for a moment. "You okay?" I had already seen them. Marissa and Darren, laughing it up on the opposite balcony, her eyes bright in the way they hadn't been with me for months. It should have hurt. It should have twisted my gut into a knot. But it didn't. It didn't hurt because I knew something she didn't. I was no longer that guy. I smiled at Ivy. "I'm good. I don't need to let them ruin my night." Ivy looked back toward her friend, who was still hovering uncertainly. "Go," Ivy said, gesturing toward the bar. "We'll join you in a bit." Her friend hesitated but nodded and left. I felt Ivy's hand tighten in mine, a simple gesture of connection. Then she turned back to me. "You're sure? You don't want to go say something?" I shook my head. "No point. I'm done pretending. Done letting her control the narrative." Ivy's smile softened, and she stepped closer. "You've got this." And then, before I could think about it too much, she kissed me. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't a bold move. It was just there. Just the right thing at the right time. When we pulled back, I felt the weight of the night shift. "No regrets," I said quietly. "None," she replied, her voice low and steady. "This is your night, Liam. Take it." As the night stretched on, the city lights below faded into the background, and I didn't think about Marissa or Darren. I didn't even think about my old life. For the first time in months, I was just living in the moment. No expectations, no plans, no broken dreams. Just me, Ivy, and the freedom I'd just begun to claim. And when we finally decided to head back to the suite, the world felt a little bit lighter. A little bit less broken. The night air had cooled as Ivy and I walked back to the hotel. The streets of Seattle glowed beneath the streetlights, the city humming with the energy of a Saturday night. We barely spoke as we strolled, our footsteps in sync, the quiet intimacy of the moment settling in between us. When we reached the suite, I swiped the key card and let the door swing open. The room felt even more expansive now, quiet, empty, and waiting. Ivy kicked off her shoes at the door, a smile playing at her lips as she glanced at me. "Well, that was a night," she said, stretching her arms above her head. "Not what I expected, but it worked." I couldn't help but chuckle. Yeah, not what I expected either. I dropped my jacket on the couch and turned toward the window, pulling back the curtains to reveal the city skyline once more. It felt like I was standing on top of everything, like I could see it all from up here, the mess of my life below me, but so far removed from it now. It felt different, lighter. Ivy's voice broke through my thoughts. "You okay?" I turned to face her, finding her watching me with that same sharp, steady gaze. Her expression was softer now, like she was trying to read me, but not in an invasive way, more like she was just giving me the space to be. It felt like a safe place, something I hadn't realized I was craving. "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I think I am." Ivy walked toward the minibar, opening it and pulling out a bottle of champagne. "You sure? Because you've been carrying that weight around for a while. You could use a drink, or maybe even a little more." I grinned, walking over to her. "A drink sounds good. But you're right. I've been carrying it all for too long." As she popped the cork, the faint sound echoed through the room, a sign that whatever had been broken was starting to come undone, slowly. She poured the champagne into 2 glasses, handing me one with a raised brow. "To new beginnings," she said, her smile playful but meaningful. I clinked my glass against hers. To freedom, I replied. We stood there for a moment, the sounds of the city fading into the background as we took a sip. The champagne was crisp, refreshing, perfect after a night of letting go. Ivy sat down on the couch, patting the space next to her. Come on, sit. Let's talk. I hesitated for just a moment before sitting beside her, the warmth of her presence oddly comforting. She didn't try to fill the silence with forced conversation. She simply existed there, in the same space, waiting for whatever came next. After a beat, I spoke. I'm not good at letting go. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm the guy who fixes things. The guy who has the plan, who does everything right, who never takes a step back. And when she left, I felt like I had lost control of everything. Ivy leaned forward, setting her glass on the table and looking at me intently. You don't have to fix everything, you know? It's okay to fall apart. It's okay to admit that you're hurt, and you don't have all the answers. That's part of being human. I exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping me. Yeah, I guess that's true. But I've been so focused on keeping it all together, on keeping up appearances, that I never really gave myself permission to just feel, to just exist without trying to prove something. Her eyes softened. You don't have to prove anything, Liam. Not to anyone, least of all to yourself. I looked at her, feeling something stir inside me. It wasn't just the comfort of the night, or the relief of being away from everything that had hurt me. It was something about her, about how she didn't push me to be someone else, about how she seemed to understand, without needing to fix anything. You get it, I said quietly. You really get it. She smiled, taking a sip of her champagne. I think we both need to get used to the idea that things don't have to be perfect. Life's messy, and sometimes, the only way out is through. But that doesn't mean we can't have a little fun along the way. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so long trying to keep everything in line, thinking that if I could just make it perfect, everything would fall into place. But Ivy was right. Perfection didn't matter anymore. It wasn't the answer. It wasn't what I needed. The truth was, I needed space to just be. To find out who I was without the weight of expectations, without the role I've been playing for so long. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to see that it was okay not to have it all figured out. I looked at Ivy, the weight of everything I had been carrying loosening with every passing second. Thanks, I said, the words more meaningful than I realized. For what? She asked, tilting her head. For reminding me that it's okay to let go. Her smile deepened, and without saying anything more, she leaned back, settling comfortably next to me. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was filled with something else. Something more honest, more real. The night went on, the city lights dimming as the hours slipped away, but in that moment, with Ivy beside me and the freedom I had been so desperately chasing finally feeling real, I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. And it felt like the start of something new. I hadn't been home in days. Every time I thought about walking back through that door, it felt like I was walking into a prison, a place that was once mine, but now just a shadow of the future I'd planned with Marissa. So I stayed at the hotel. I stayed in the suite, in the freedom that came with the anonymity of a fresh start. But it wasn't enough. I couldn't keep running. Eventually, I knew I'd have to face the place where everything had crumbled. When I finally returned to my apartment, the silence of the place hit me first. It was the kind of silence that felt too loud. The kind that made every corner echo with all the things I'd rather not think about. I walked inside, tossing my keys onto the kitchen counter. The apartment was neat, as it always had been. But it wasn't mine anymore. It was a hollow version of what it used to be, a version that held nothing but the memories of promises made and broken. I knew what I needed to do. I grabbed my phone, dialing the number I had avoided for days. Hey, it's Liam, I said when the line picked up. I need you to come over and start the renovations. I'm redoing everything. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? I mean, we can do this in phases, but it'll take a lot of work to completely overhaul it. I don't care. Do whatever it takes. Just get started. I hung up without waiting for more confirmation, pacing through the apartment. I could hear the sounds of construction from the street outside, the bustle of life moving on, and I realized that it was time for me to do the same. The walls felt too close, the space too small. I needed to reimagine it all, tear it down and rebuild it, physically and emotionally. I wasn't just going to live here anymore. I was going to make this place mine from the ground up. And if that meant splitting it down the middle, creating an entirely new space, then that's exactly what I'd do. A couple of hours later, the crew arrived, their tools and equipment filling the hallway. As I opened the door, I saw the first signs of what would be a massive transformation. Workers setting up their stations, measuring walls, taking inventory. There was something oddly satisfying about watching them strip the apartment down to its bones, something therapeutic in knowing that I was taking control, that I was the one making the choices now. I walked into the master bedroom and stood there for a moment, my gaze lingering on the bed we'd once shared. It had always been her side that was messy, her shoes and clothes scattered across the floor, her makeup collection spilling over onto the dresser. Now, it was empty. Just a bed frame and a few discarded pillows. The place felt like a shell. I stepped forward and opened the closet. Her things were still there. I shouldn't have been surprised, but there they were. Dresses she'd worn to work, shoes she'd worn out on weekends, jewelry, things I'd never even noticed until now, when they had no meaning left. I grabbed a box and began to pack them up. It was a clean break, something I knew I had to do. The woman who had left wasn't the same person who had filled these spaces with life and laughter. That person was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. And I couldn't keep holding on to the ghost of her. I kept packing, stacking the boxes in the corner of the bedroom. When the workers started in on the living room, pulling down the wallpaper and removing the built-in shelves, I turned to look at the apartment, now a construction site. And I smiled. It felt right. By the time the workers were halfway through, I was already on the phone again, this time calling the bank. "I need to change some things," I said when they answered. "I want to transfer all of our savings into a separate account. I'm taking back control." The agent on the other end of the line asked for the usual details, but I was beyond caring. Marissa had taken her piece when she walked out the door. I had every right to make my move now. Once I hung up, I sat down on the couch, watching as the crew worked. I couldn't help but feel that the changes in the apartment mirrored the changes inside me. For the first time in a long time, I was the one calling the shots. The workers left after a few hours, their job for the day done, but I stayed behind. I couldn't leave. This place was finally becoming something new, something that was mine and mine alone. I would finish the job they'd started. The next morning, I called Ivy. I hadn't talked to her much since the night on the rooftop bar, and I knew I should at least check in. When she picked up, her voice was warm, but there was a hint of concern in it. "Hey, what's up?" "I've been busy," I said, looking around at the empty apartment, still in its state of transition. "I'm making some changes. I'm rebuilding everything. Physically, emotionally, everything." She was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. "Good. It sounds like you need it." "I do. I've been holding on to the wrong things for too long." "That's part of it, right?" she replied. "You can't move forward until you clear the space." I smiled at the thought. "Exactly. Anyway, I was thinking of heading out of town for a while." "Belize, maybe. Want to join me?" I could hear her hesitation through the phone. "Are you sure that's the right move? You just started this process. It might be better to let everything settle for a bit." "I will," I said, walking over to the window and staring out at the city, my eyes following the busy streets below. "But I need a change. Something far enough away that I don't have to look back for a while." "You deserve it, Liam," she said softly. "But if you do go, just make sure you're doing it for yourself, not just to run away from things." "I will," I said, nodding to myself. "I'm not running anymore. I'm rebuilding." When the call ended, I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I wasn't focused on what I had lost. I was focused on what I was gaining. I was gaining my life back, and I wasn't going to let anything or anyone take it from me again. The week in Belize felt like a dream, a complete escape. The tropical heat, the smell of salt water in the air, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was everything I needed. Ivy had agreed to join me, and I was surprised by how much lighter I felt with her by my side. There was no pressure, no expectations. Just two people, spending their days exploring ruins, hiking through jungle trails, and lying under the stars, letting the quiet soothe the edges of everything. But even in this paradise, I knew I couldn't run forever. There was still a part of me that had to face what was waiting back home. I'd made the decision to step away, but sooner or later, I'd have to confront the reality of what had happened with Marissa and how it had shaken everything I thought I knew about love and trust. It was a few days into the trip when the news reached me. A text from a mutual friend of Marissa's. It was simple, just one line. "You know Marissa's not the only one with a secret, right?" I stared at my phone, unsure of what to make of it. The message felt cryptic, but something about it nagged at me. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't help myself. I had already seen Marissa move on, so why wouldn't there be more? Why wouldn't her carefully constructed image of the perfect life crumble even further? I glanced over at Ivy, who was sitting at the edge of the balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The evening light bathed her in a soft glow, and for a moment, the world felt perfect again. But I knew better than to let that text go. I had to know what it meant. "I'll be right back," I said to Ivy, my voice distant even as I tried to keep it calm. I didn't want her to see the storm brewing inside me. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I found a secluded spot by the poolside, far from the noise of the resort, and typed out a response. "What do you mean? What's going on?" The reply came quickly. "You don't want to know, Liam. But you deserve to. It's bigger than you think. I'll send you proof soon." I put my phone down for a moment, trying to steady my breath. The world around me felt like it was starting to close in. What was I even thinking, getting involved in this drama again? Wasn't I supposed to be moving forward, rebuilding? Before I could wrestle with the thoughts swirling in my head, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message came with an attachment, a screenshot. I opened it, my eyes scanning the text. It was a series of messages, but the one that caught my attention was from Marissa, sent only a few weeks before she left me. "You know I'm not really into him, right? But he's too good of a backup plan. Darren's more useful for my brand. I'll keep him around for a while, but once the plan is in motion, I'll be done with him." My heart dropped. The words on the screen blurred for a moment as everything inside me twisted. I felt like the ground had just been ripped out from under me. It wasn't just about Darren. It wasn't just about the fact that she had left me for someone else. It was about everything she had said about me, about how I had been nothing more than a convenient placeholder. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. She had played me. The woman I had trusted had been plotting her escape from the moment we'd gotten engaged. I closed the phone, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I couldn't look at it anymore. Not yet. The weight of it felt too heavy to carry. But I knew what had to happen next. I walked back to the balcony where Ivy was waiting, her gaze already trained on me, sensing the shift in my mood. She didn't ask what had happened, but I could see the question in her eyes. She knew I had gone somewhere dark, and she was waiting for me to come back. "I need to go home," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Ivy didn't say anything at first. She didn't question it. She just stood, walking over to me and placing a hand gently on my arm. Her touch grounded me, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone in this. "Okay," she said simply. "We can go." "I have to," I said, swallowing back the lump in my throat. "I can't keep running from this." We spent the next hour packing, and then we made our way to the airport. The flight back to Seattle felt long, the silence between us stretching as I tried to process everything that had just hit me. When we finally landed, I was exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. But I knew one thing for sure, it was time to face the music. As soon as I stepped off the plane, I grabbed my phone and called the one person I hadn't spoken to in days, Marissa's maid of honor, Lily. I knew that if there was anyone who could shed light on what had been going on behind the scenes, it would be her. She had always been close to Marissa. If anyone had the truth, it would be her. "Lily, it's Liam," I said when she answered, my voice low and deliberate. "I need you to tell me everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but tense. "You're not going to like what I have to say," she warned. "But I'll tell you everything I know." And with that, I knew that the real unmasking was about to begin. The next few days were a blur. I was trying to piece together everything that had happened, everything that had been hidden, and everything that I had failed to see before. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became, not just with Marissa, but with myself for not recognizing the lies sooner. I'd been so consumed by the idea of what we were supposed to be that I couldn't see what she had been doing behind my back. The call from Lily had shattered any illusion I'd left about who Marissa really was. Lily had filled in the gaps, revealing the truth about Marissa's plans with Darren, how she'd never been fully invested in me. She'd only stayed with me long enough to set things up, to make sure she had a clean exit strategy when the time came. But now that I knew the truth, the anger that had been simmering inside me began to cool, replaced with a cold, calculating resolve. I didn't need her explanations. I didn't need her apologies. I needed to be done. And I was done. The real test, I knew, would be when Marissa finally reached out. It wasn't a matter of if, I knew she would. But when her name finally flashed across my phone screen, I was ready. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Liam, hey," Marissa's voice came through, tentative and soft. "I've been trying to reach you. I need to talk." I sat down on the couch, running my hand over my face. I could hear the desperation in her voice, but I wasn't swayed. Not anymore. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice flat, almost indifferent. I don't know how to say this, she began, her tone shaky. But I need you to understand. What I did, it wasn't because of you. It was me. I've changed. I was just trying to find myself again. I thought, she cut off with a sigh. I thought you'd still be there, waiting. I didn't expect you to find out the way you did. I felt a dull ache in my chest, a ghost of the pain I used to feel when I thought about her. But it was fading, slowly being replaced by something else. Something stronger. Marissa, I interrupted, my voice steady. You left. You made a choice. And I won't let you rewrite history now. I'm not waiting for you to fix this. There was a long pause on the other end, her silence almost as deafening as her words had been. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, pleading. I still love you, Liam. Please. I know I messed up. But we can fix this, can't we? We can. No, I said, the word final, cutting through the air like a blade. You don't get to come back from this. You don't get to tell me that you love me now, after everything you've done. After everything you've planned behind my back. This isn't about me waiting for you to fix your mistakes. This is about you finally owning up to what you did. She was quiet again, but I could hear the shakiness in her breath. She wasn't used to me being like this. She wasn't used to me being resolute, to shutting the door in her face. But I wasn't the man I was when she left. I was stronger now. I'm sorry, she said finally, the words so hollow, so rehearsed. I never meant for it to get this far. I just didn't know how to handle things. I should have told you everything before. I thought I could keep it all together. But I can't live without you, Liam. I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. You never had to live without me, Marissa. You had your backup plan. You had Darren. You were never alone. She was silent again, and I could feel her frustration rising. She wasn't used to this version of me. The version who had been broken, sure, but who had rebuilt himself piece by piece. You're right, she said finally, her voice dropping to a whisper. I don't deserve you. I know that. But I still want you back. Too late, I said. You had your chance. You made your choice. There was a long pause before she spoke again, but when she did, it was different. I can't fix this, can I? No, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. You can't. You had your chance. And you threw it all away. The line went quiet. I could feel her trying to hold it together, but it was over. There was no going back. I took a deep breath, my fingers gripping the phone tighter. Goodbye, Marissa. I didn't wait for a response. I hung up, not out of anger, but because I knew there was nothing more to say. I set the phone down on the table and leaned back on the couch, staring at the empty space around me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. It was done. There were no more apologies, no more lies, no more second chances. The past was behind me, and as I sat there in the silence of my apartment, my new apartment, the one that was mine now, I knew that I was finally free. And I wouldn't be going back. A few weeks had passed since that conversation with Marissa. Since that final moment when I'd let go of everything I'd thought I knew about love, about us, about who I was supposed to be. I'd thrown myself into the renovations, walls torn down, rooms reimagined, and with each passing day, I felt more and more like I was building something real. Not just a new apartment, but a new version of myself. The place was starting to take shape, sharp, sleek lines replacing the old, tired decor. The old furniture was gone, replaced by modern pieces that reflected who I was now, independent, strong, no longer tethered to the past. My life was beginning to feel like it was mine again, not the life I'd built with Marissa, not the life I'd been trying to fix for months. It was the life I was choosing. It wasn't just the apartment that had changed. My routine had shifted too. I was starting to enjoy the quiet moments, the slow mornings where I could sip coffee without having to rush to anyone else's schedule. The weight on my shoulders, the pressure I'd placed on myself to make everyone else happy, was slowly starting to melt away. But the biggest change was the person who had started to become a part of this new life. Ivy. She wasn't there every day, but we were growing closer, each meeting feeling a little less like a distraction and more like a connection. She wasn't pushing for anything. She didn't ask for explanations about my past or try to fix my broken pieces. She simply was, and it felt like that was enough. It was Saturday morning, and I had the place to myself, just me, a cup of coffee, and a pile of receipts I needed to sort through for the new furniture purchases. As I was sitting at the kitchen table, organizing everything, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Ivy. Hey, I answered, smiling at the thought of her. What's up? Hey, so. I'm thinking about spending the day in the city, she said, her voice light. Maybe we could grab lunch or something. You know, before you disappear into your little world of renovations for the next couple of months. I laughed. Not a bad idea. I could use a break. Meet me at that little Italian place by the water. Perfect. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and took a moment to reflect. An hour wasn't a lot of time, but it was enough. Enough for me to remember that life wasn't just about fixing things, it was also about enjoying them. I set the receipts aside and quickly showered. When I was dressed and ready, I locked the apartment door behind me and stepped out into the cool Seattle air. The city, with all its noise and energy, felt like a different place now. It didn't feel like the place where I'd been stuck, grieving the loss of my old life. It felt like a city I was finally part of, not just passing through. When I arrived at the Italian restaurant, Ivy was already seated at a corner table, a glass of water in front of her, staring out at the water with a thoughtful expression. She looked up as I approached, and her smile was a little more relaxed than usual, less guarded. Hey, she greeted me warmly, standing to pull out the chair next to hers. I didn't think you'd make it on time. Wouldn't dream of being late, I said with a grin, sitting down. I like being on time for good company. She laughed, shaking her head. You're laying it on thick. I shrugged. Can't help it. You've got me charmed. Is that so? She teased, sipping her water. I'll make sure to keep you around then. The waiter came by to take our orders, and I realized that for the first time in a while, I didn't feel the need to rush. The tension I had carried for so long was gone. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, wondering if Marissa would pop up in the background or if something would remind me of her. Ivy and I talked about everything, nothing serious at first, just the little things. She told me about her veterinary studies, about how she was considering taking a year off to travel before going into a full-time program. I told her about the renovations, about how I had made plans to visit Belize and hadn't realized how badly I needed the break. After a while, though, the conversation turned deeper. We talked about our pasts, what had brought us to this point in our lives. I told her about growing up, about how I had always been the responsible one, the one who put others first. How it had led me into a life of doing everything for everyone else until I didn't know how to stop. She listened, nodding, her eyes never leaving mine as I spoke. When it was her turn, she told me about her family, how she had always felt like the black sheep, the one who didn't fit in with her parents' high expectations. How she'd always had to fight for her place in their world, and how that had shaped the way she saw relationships. You know, Ivy said after a pause, sometimes we spend so much time trying to be what everyone else wants, that we forget who we actually are. We get lost in all the expectations. I nodded, understanding completely. I think I've been guilty of that. I spent so much time trying to make things work for Marissa, for my family, that I didn't realize I wasn't even making it work for myself. She smiled softly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I think you're starting to figure it out now, though. I looked down at our hands, surprised by the warmth that spread through me. It was simple, this connection. It wasn't about fixing anything or finding some perfect solution. It was about being here, now, with someone who understood without needing to change anything. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. Yeah, I think I am. The rest of the afternoon was filled with easy conversation, shared stories, and a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been craving. I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to. I was finally starting to see that there was life beyond the hurt. And I was starting to realize that, maybe, just maybe, there was a future ahead of me that didn't involve carrying the weight of the past. When we finished lunch, Ivy stood and pulled on her jacket. So, what's next? She asked, her eyes twinkling with mischief. I stood up, matching her smile. I don't know, but I think it's time to see where this goes. We walked out of the restaurant together, the sun beginning to dip low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the water. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for what came next. And maybe, for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. It had been over a year since Ivy left for her research opportunity abroad. The days stretched long without her, and as much as I missed her, I knew it was time for both of us to find our own paths. We had spent our time together in a way that healed us both, but life had called her away. The connection we shared had been real, but it wasn't meant to last forever. That was something we both understood, even if it wasn't easy to admit. I had spent that year focusing on myself, my work, and the apartment I had transformed into something that truly felt like mine. Each project, each renovation, Each step I took had been a declaration that I wasn't defined by what had happened in the past. I wasn't defined by the mistakes I'd made or the woman who had left me. But even as I rebuilt my life, there was still the shadow of Marissa hanging over me. The past had a way of lingering, creeping in when I least expected it. I knew the final step would be letting go, not just of the apartment, but of everything that had held me back. The message came in the middle of the day while I was walking through the city, lost in my thoughts. "Liam, can we talk?" It was from Marissa. I hadn't heard from her in months. Not a single message, not a single call. She had moved on, I assumed. But there she was, reaching out again. Part of me felt the familiar rush of anger, the part of me that had never fully healed from her betrayal. But I had learned something in the time since we'd parted ways. I wasn't the same person anymore. And I didn't need her to fix anything. I didn't need her apology. I glanced at the time and, after a moment's hesitation, I hit reply. "Sure. Let's talk." A couple of hours later, I found myself sitting in the same cafe where I had first met her, back when everything seemed simple, when we had been full of plans and promises. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. This was where it had all started. But I wasn't the same man who had walked in here months ago, desperate for answers. I wasn't even sure if I had any questions left to ask. Marissa showed up a few minutes later, her hair longer than I remembered, her posture different. She looked the same, but there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. She didn't sit down immediately, hovering as if unsure of how to approach me. I stood up, pulling out the chair for her. "You wanted to talk. So, talk." She sat down, taking a deep breath. She was nervous, I could tell. "Good. I've been thinking a lot," she started, her voice tentative. "About everything that happened. About us." I let her continue, but I wasn't in a rush to hear her side. I didn't need closure. I had already found it on my own. "I know I hurt you," she said quietly, her hands twisting in her lap. "And I've never really apologized. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I was just doing what I needed for myself. I never meant for things to end the way they did. I felt a pang of something, maybe regret, maybe frustration, but I kept it to myself. I wasn't here to make her feel better. I wasn't here to hear the sob story. I was here because, for some reason, I owed myself this moment." "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "You never meant for things to end the way they did. But they did. And that's what you need to understand. It's over. It's been over for a long time." She looked up, surprised by my bluntness. "But I've changed, Liam. I've been working on myself. I've realized things I didn't see before. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't make up for what happened, but I just wanted you to know that I regret what I did." Her words felt empty, like something she thought she should say, but didn't really mean. And maybe she did regret it. Maybe she was sorry. But I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. They didn't fix the past. They didn't change the way I felt now. "I've heard that before," I said, shaking my head slightly. "I've heard it from people who never really change. They say all the right things when they want something from you. But here's the thing, Marissa, I don't need you to fix what happened. I'm not here to listen to what you regret or wish you'd done differently. That's on you." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "I wasn't done yet. I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I was angry when you left, and I was angry when I found out what you'd really been doing behind my back. But I'm not angry now. What I am is tired. Tired of holding on to something that wasn't real. And tired of hoping you'd come back and apologize in a way that made everything okay again." Marissa sat back, her face softening with something like understanding. But there was no satisfaction in it, no sense of victory on my part. I was just done. "You were part of my life," I continued, "but you don't get to be part of it anymore. Not in the way you think. You've made your choices, and I've made mine. I'm not holding on to this anymore." She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "I understand," she said softly. "I really do." I wasn't looking for closure from her, but I got it anyway. Not because she apologized or gave me the answers I wanted, but because I realized that I had let go. I didn't need to know why she did what she did. I didn't need to know if she truly regretted it. I had moved on. I was already free. "I think it's time we both move forward," I said, standing up from the table. "You've got your life, and I've got mine. And that's the way it's going to be." She stood up too, her face still soft but understanding. "I don't expect anything from you, Liam. I just wanted to apologize. For everything." I nodded. "It's done. Goodbye, Marissa." I turned to leave, and I didn't look back. As I stepped out into the cool air of the city, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders, like I was shedding the last layer of the past. Marissa was no longer part of my life, not in any real way. I didn't need her to come back or to apologize. I just needed to leave her behind. I pulled out my phone and saw the message from Ivy. How'd it go? I smiled as I typed my reply. It's over. For good. The phone buzzed almost instantly. I'm glad. You deserve that peace, Liam. I looked at the city ahead of me, the streets full of people heading in every direction. The world was full of possibility, and I was ready to see where it would take me. I pressed the button on my phone and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally driving my own life, with no one else's voice in the rearview mirror. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel and share your opinion about this story in the comments.